My mom and dad came to join this rally. While my dad's here, my mom just couldn't help herself but be torn away from this incredible thrift outlet next door. And I'm sure I'll be getting some new socks as a result of my participation in today's event. So your self-discipline is super impressive. I also wanted to just give a special shout out to Jimmy. There's a great photograph of the two of us sitting on the floor of the Senate, literally sitting I think at 11:45 at night, bleary-eyed with our phones, trying to coordinate the efforts. Jimmy and Mark Levine and I, we were just working down to the wire to try to get the DISCLOSE Act through last year, and unfortunately we just came one vote short. But we were a little band of brothers, and there was some sisters involved too, trying to fight to make this thing happen. And I just think that now with a couple of the changes that have happened, with a 2/3 majority in both houses, we've got a moment to get this thing through, and it would be an incredible final legacy for you to get this thing passed and then go off to represent us in Congress. So it's a big thanks to you. So, obviously, incredible shout out to Trent Lang. I mean, this guy is just such a champion. He has an amazing passion, an amazing determination, and he has also got an amazing email list that allows him to, and this is something that's very, very important, because I come from an area that is pretty progressive, right? I'm from Santa Monica, the People's Republic. And everybody in Santa Monica is all on board, a lot of these great progressive causes. But the fact of the matter is that our colleagues who represent the Central Valley or other parts of the state, as interested as they are in coming to Santa Monica every once in a while and having dinner at Fig, they're simply not that interested from hearing from constituents from my neck of the woods when ultimately it's the people in their districts who get to decide whether they stay in office or not. And so it's the geographic spread, the geographic intensity of the California Clean Money Campaign and all the partner organizations that are represented here that are ultimately so important. Trent's ability to churn out phone calls in districts all over the state, including rural areas, including suburban areas, including parts of the Central Valley, is so valuable in getting good bills passed through the legislature, and I think it will prove very valuable in getting AB 14 passed this year. So this was an incredibly important bill. We are so determined to make this happen finally. You've got all these Orwellian names like Californians from Mom and Apple Pie. They're showing up in people's doors, and no one has any idea who the hell's paying for them. And the time has come to give our voters the opportunity to evaluate who actually is flooding their mailboxes with all this messaging, so that they can have a better understanding and they can take that into account when they're making their voting decisions. We've also got another companion bill that we're working together, SB 651, which is our initiative petition DISCLOSE Act, which looks at the fact that you've got all these folks hanging outside of Whole Foods and Giant and every other store under the sun, getting your signatures. And of course, you don't know who's paying them to do it. And there's almost always, somebody paying them to collect those signatures. And you're oftentimes signing an initiative that looks great on its head, and then you find out later that it was actually put on the ballot by some particular special interest. And so we want to make sure that the top 3 donors to those petition drive campaigns also need to be disclosed right there on the petition when people are making their signing, so they can know what they're signing themselves onto when they sign those petitions. And I think that's an important part of the process. I also want to thank the California Clean Money Campaign and Common Cause for their incredibly hard work with us on 1107, SB 1107. I also want to give a special shout out to my friend Sandra Fluke, who we actually ran against each other for this seat, and it was a hard-fought race. I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. And we then became absolute partners in crime on getting this SB 1107 passed together, which basically makes it so that the state and localities can put in place public financing for campaigns, and an important reform that we all know we need to try to scale, both statewide and nationally. And Sandra was right there with me. We were having phone calls all the time trying to figure out ways to convince some of our colleagues. We ultimately were able to get a couple of Republicans to come on board in both houses to vote for this thing. and we were able to get it through, and ultimately it's going to be a very important step in the right direction in trying to scale public financing of campaigns. And now we can all work together to convince our local county governments, to convince our city governments to provide public financing for campaigns. And so that's a very important reform, and let's work together on trying to make that happen in our localities and build upon that. And then finally, the California Clean Money Campaign, everyone here worked so hard to try to get Citizens United on the ballot. That was SB 254. It turned into Prop 59. We were able to get it passed. Unfortunately, I think we were all really hoping that it would provide an important milestone for a new progressive Supreme Court to turn to and draw upon and allude to in that decision that we were all looking forward to, that would overturn the Citizens United decision. Now, unfortunately, the country's taken on a darker turn since then. But we are so hopeful that we have to keep fighting, because I'll tell you, ever since the Citizens United ruling was issued, spending by super PACs funded by organizations with unlimited contribution limits has now reached $1 billion since that decision came down. And by the way, more than $600 million of that is just from less than 200 donors and their spouses. So it's a minuscule portion of our population, of our great American population, that is spending an extraordinary amount of dark money in our process, and we've got to keep that fight going. That's why we're here today. That's why we're going to work so hard to get the DISCLOSE Act back. Thank you for your activism. Thank you for your energy.